Jaylen Brown has now issued a formal response to Stephen A. Smith. And to understand why this moment carries the weight that it does, you have to go back to where this tension actually started. Cast your mind back to when Brown was left off the Team USA roster. Stephen A. Smith went on air and cited sources from around the league, claiming that people within NBA circles had concerns about Jaylen Brown's character, that he wasn't well liked, that there were questions about who he was behind the scenes. It was the kind of commentary that doesn't just criticize a player's game, it attacks his reputation. And this wasn't a new narrative. It traces all the way back to when Brown was first drafted, when certain voices in the media labeled him as someone who thought he was too smart, too opinionated, too aware of the world outside of basketball, whatever exactly that was supposed to mean. Because on its face, wanting your players to be informed, thoughtful human beings seems like exactly the kind of thing you'd want from the people representing your franchise. But that stigma attached itself to Jaylen Brown's name early, and it never fully let go, despite the fact that he has never done anything to genuinely harm anyone. He holds strong opinions. People in the media have tried to manufacture a rivalry between him and Jason Tatum. But as far as conduct goes, as far as being a professional and carrying himself with consistency both on and off the court, Brown has done exactly that. The problem, in Brown's view, is that Stephen A. Smith has repeatedly said things that breathe new life into that narrative, that keep the stigma circulating, that remind the public of a version of Jaylen Brown that doesn't line up with who he actually is. The two had previously sat down together. Brown appeared on Stephen A.'s ESPN platform to hash things out, but that clearly didn't put it to rest because Stephen A. doubled down on his first take commentary, and now Brown is responding again, this time publicly and on his own terms. Here's what he had to say.
This is where all the clickbaiters is ready to clip. Let's get into the good stuff. Last week I had an exchange online with Stephen A. Where he was vocal about what he thought I needed to do, and he also said some other things. So let's watch it together on stream chat. We can react to it together. This is just we're just doing some investigative journalism. This is one of the clips that was going viral from our exchange. This was his response.
On Jaylen Brown's program. You know where Jason Tatum was?
Let's start it over.
That Jason Tatum hasn't appeared on Jaylen Brown's program.
Okay.
You know where Jason Tatum was? Right here on first take.
Let's pause right there. What type of journalism is this? Jason Tatum hasn't been on my stream, and this is what we're talking about on first take? What if JT just don't like being somewhere in an uncontrolled environment? Why are you doing journalism on me having guests on my stream? And this is a part of the reason why I started streaming. This is a part of the reason why people use the term clown and it synchronizes with someone like Stephen A. Smith. Because this is what you're using your platform for. What are you talking about? Let's continue.
So in other words, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum showed up on first take before he showed up on your damn show.
What does that have to do with anything? What? This is journalism? This is why I started streaming, chat. What does that have to do with basketball? What does that have to do with performance? What does that have to do with anything relative to like the game? You know what I mean? It doesn't. And this is where, why people call him out, because he uses his platform and his nature, and his nature can be, this causes issues.
And then this is stuff that's just flying over your head? You think nobody notices that hasn't happened? You're saying it's the year that Jason Tatum was down with an Achilles tear is your favorite year? The year that Jason Tatum had to sit out, this closeout game 7 because of the injury he incurred in game.
What's up, Jess? Can y'all hear it?
I turned it up. I can hear it. Here, ready? Pull.
That's your favorite year? The year?
I think they might be able to hear it better now.
Hold this up a little bit.
Which one?
That's how, yeah, go this way. Keep going, try there. Yeah, let's see now.
That you lose 3-1. Of all the stars in the history of the Boston Celtics, you the only one because you were driving the bus. Ain't nobody pointing to Jason Tatum. He was sitting.
Right.
He was sitting. He was in street clothes. You the only one. The only star in the history of the Boston Celtics that ever lost a 3-1 lead and surrendered it, and that's your favorite year. Why? Because you and your teammates developed better chemistry and camaraderie? You understand what I'm saying? Because you overcame adversity?
See, this is where I gotta pause again. See, this is a narrative that he's creating. This is in journalism. This is him making his own opinion and formalizing it about what I had to say on his platform. And this is why, respectfully, a lot of people say, fuck Stephen A. Because this is the type of stuff he does and then he doesn't recognize it. But he's creating a narrative saying that the reason why I'm saying that I had my favorite season is because selfishly I had a best performing year. Not the fact that we outproved expectations, not the fact that everybody expected us to be nothing and we had to fight and we showed up and we competed every single day and we had to fight for every victory. Not the joy of watching our teammates grow, or not the joy of watching guys who are unproven start to solidify themselves as well through leadership, through chemistry. Like, he maybe not doesn't understand that because maybe he's never had to fight for nothing in his life. Maybe anytime adversity is hit, he's rolled over or he's gave in. So he thinks it's the same thing as somebody who has little to no expectation and they stood up and they made a name for themselves. He may not understand that concept, and that's why he's pushing his narrative. But once again, this is what Stephen A is using his platform for. Let's see what he finishes with.
What happens? What's the remedy? Given all these things you're pointing out, I'm with you. But that's why I brought up the whole trade thing again. What are you going to do about it?
I don't mind. But what I'm saying is the first order of business is that he needs to be quiet and like big.
Let me stop right there. Did he just say I needed to be quiet? Be quiet for who? Man, fuck Stephen A. Stephen A, Stephen B, Stephen C. Like, my offer still stands. You want me to be quiet and stop streaming? Well, I want you to be quiet and get off these networks, because you're not using your platform to do real journalism. You're using your platform to use clickbait. You're using your tell this motherfucker to retire, you know, because he's the face of clickbait media at the point. And maybe with his retirement, we could spark a movement to get the rest of these motherfuckers out of here, or to also have some type of forget journalistic integrity, actual integrity, in order to hold themselves accountable to the bullshit takes they put out with no basis, no bias, no information, just narrative, just for the sake of just pushing a weak narrative, just purely out of that. I'll give it up. I'll pass streaming. I'll sign some streamers or some shit. I'll you know what I mean? It ain't a big deal. Y'all ain't never heard from me before this. Think about it. I don't do no media, no podcasts. I don't do none of that. I barely post on social media. But the fact is that my obligation is to, as an athlete, I'm obligated to speak to the media. It's my job. Like, he thinks the media is his job, and so is it's my job too. It's in my contract. If I do not speak to the media, then I will be fined. So when they use that comparison where it's my job, it's your job to play basketball, it's also my job to speak to the media. It is also my job to speak to the media. I get fined if I don't.
Now let's get into what was actually said and why it matters. Honestly, it's a good thing Jaylen Brown came out and explained his comments about this being his favorite season, because people need to remember the context. Just weeks earlier, going into the All-Star break, Brown posted team statistics comparing his numbers to the previous season alongside Tatum's, a clear signal that he felt he wasn't getting the individual recognition he deserved. He was making the case that he belonged in the MVP conversation, that he was consistently being left outside the top 5 without a real shot at winning it. So when he then turned around and called this his favorite season, despite the team blowing a 3-1 series lead, people raised their eyebrows. and Brown admitting he didn't even know Tatum wasn't playing in Game 7 until roughly 45 minutes before tip-off only added more fuel to an already burning fire. Brown didn't do enough to address the optics, and Stephen A. Smith essentially said on television what a significant portion of the audience was already thinking. But here's the distinction Brown is drawing, and it's an important one. This specific comment isn't really what this is about. Brown's frustration runs deeper than one headline. What bothers him is the larger, ongoing pattern of Stephen A. amplifying the narrative that he isn't well liked, without ever stopping to question whether that narrative is actually true or fair. Brown's point is straightforward. Instead of challenging the stigma, Stephen A. keeps reinforcing it. Instead of asking why someone who talks openly about building Black Wall Street in Boston, who gives back to his community, who operates as a serious entrepreneur off the court, why that person keeps getting painted as difficult, Stephen A. simply repeats what the narrative already says and sends it out to millions of viewers. That's what Brown wants people to understand, not just the basketball criticism, the selective amplification of a story that was never fully accurate to begin with. And there's a broader conversation sitting underneath all of this, one about how sports media operates right now. Stephen A. Smith has been one of the most powerful voices in this space for years. He's taken shots at countless players and shaped public opinion in real time. But something has shifted. Players now have their own platforms, their own audiences, their own ability to respond immediately and directly. If they don't like what you said, they can call it out in real time in front of their own community without needing a network to give them airtime. That's new, and it's changing the dynamic in ways the traditional media landscape is still trying to process. Jaylen Brown is far from the first to push back on Stephen A. specifically. Stephon Marbury said it years ago, flat out calling for people to stop giving him the platform. The difference now is that players don't need to wait for an interview request to respond. They just go live. The era of debate shows having the final word on who an athlete is, that era is ending. And the all-or-nothing approach that dominates these platforms isn't helping anyone. It's either complete adoration or complete destruction. There's no space in between for honest, grounded analysis that actually respects what these players have accomplished. Even Brown joked that he'd walk away from streaming entirely and sponsor other streamers if Stephen A. would just go quiet. But here's the thing. Don't do it, Jaylen. Keep the platform. Keep building it. Bring players on. Create the kind of media space where people who have actually lived this game get to ask the questions. Former players, respected voices, people who've been in the trenches, let them lead the conversation. Host something at All-Star Weekend. Go beyond the league's mandatory media obligations and build something that belongs entirely to the players. Because the platform you're building could be worth more than people realize. Keep going. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Like the video, share it, and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time.